The smell of coffee and bacon grease hit me as I pushed through the glass door of Mickey's Diner on North Clark Street. Chicago's November wind had already numbed my fingers, but the warmth inside wrapped around me like an old quilt. This was my Thursday spot, had been for 3 years now. "Morning, Sarah." Mickey called from behind the counter, his graying mustache twitching with his smile. "The usual?" "You know it," I said, sliding into my regular booth by the window. Outside, the early morning commuters hunched against the cold, their breath visible in small clouds as they hurried past. I wasn't here for the eggs or the coffee, though Mickey made both just the way I liked them. I was here for the watching, the listening, the small moments when I could make a difference without anyone knowing. At the counter, an older man in a worn Marine Corps jacket counted change from a plastic bag, his weathered hands shaking slightly. 2 booths over, a young mother tried to keep her toddler entertained while stretching a single pancake order between them. These were my people, the ones life had roughed up a bit, the ones who needed a small miracle but would never ask for one. Mickey brought my coffee, black with 2 sugars. "Busy morning," he said, lowering his voice. "That young mom's been nursing that pancake for half an hour." I nodded, understanding. Mickey and I had developed our own language over the years. He'd point out the ones who needed help, and I'd take care of it. Always anonymous. Always quiet. The veteran finished counting his coins, coming up short for his meal. I watched him recount, the disappointment settling into the lines around his eyes. That's when I caught Mickey's attention and gave him our signal, a small tap on my coffee cup. "Sir," Mickey said to the veteran, "looks like your meal's already been covered. Someone paid it forward this morning." The confusion on the man's face shifted to something softer. "But I didn't. Who?" "They asked to remain anonymous," Mickey said, already knowing my rules. "Just said to tell you, thank you for your service." I kept my eyes on my newspaper, but I could see the veteran's reflection in the window. He stood a little straighter, held his head a little higher. That transformation, that was why I did this. 20 minutes later, I signaled for the young mother's bill too. Mickey handled it with his usual grace, telling her a guardian angel had taken care of breakfast. She actually teared up, hugging her daughter tight. This was my Chicago, not the gleaming towers of the Loop or the tourist-packed Magnificent Mile, but these small diners and family restaurants where real people faced real struggles. Every Thursday at Mickey's, Tuesdays at the Sunrise Cafe in Wicker Park, Saturdays at Rose's Kitchen in Pilsen. I had my routes, my rhythms, my quiet rebellion against a world that had forgotten how to care without cameras rolling. I finished my eggs and left my usual tip, always cash, always generous. Mickey knew better than to thank me out loud. We just exchanged a nod, understanding between conspirators and kindness. The wind hit harder when I stepped outside, but I barely felt it. There was something about those moments, seeing the relief wash over someone's face, watching their faith in humanity get restored. That warmed me from the inside out. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant. "Don't forget, lunch meeting at Marchese's at noon." Marchese's, the new upscale Italian place in River North, where a single appetizer cost more than a week's worth of meals at Mickey's. Where my business associates would discuss million-dollar deals over $100 entrees. 2 different worlds, and I was one of the few who moved between them. I pulled my coat tighter and headed for the L station. 3 more stops to make this morning. Mrs. Chun at the corner bodega, who always gave free candy to the neighborhood kids despite barely making rent. Tom, the homeless poet who sat outside the library, writing beautiful verses on cardboard. And the breakfast cart guy on Madison who'd been sending money back to his family in Mexico for 15 years. They'd all find their burdens a little lighter today, though they'd never know why. That's how it had to be. The moment you put your name on kindness, it became something else. Performance, ego, transaction. True generosity lived in the shadows, in the spaces between knowing and being known. The city rushed past the L train windows, a blur of brick and steel and dreams. Somewhere in those buildings, people were waking up to another day of struggle. And I'd be there, invisible, making it just a little bit easier. This was my secret. My purpose. My way of balancing the scales in a city that could be both cruel and beautiful. 3 years, thousands of meals, and not a single person knew. That's exactly how I wanted it. Until that night at Marques's changed everything. Marques's felt like stepping into another universe. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables dressed in crisp white linens, and the soft clink of expensive silverware mixed with hushed conversations about mergers and market shares. I smoothed my black dress, the one I kept at the office for these occasions, and spotted my business partners at a corner table. "Sarah, there you are," David waved me over. "We were just discussing the quarterly projections." I slid into my seat, already feeling the familiar disconnect. This morning I'd been watching a mother stretch one pancake to feed two. Now I was looking at a menu where the cheapest salad cost $35. "Before we start," Jennifer said, leaning in with that gossip-ready smile, "did you hear Marcus Wellington is in town? The tech billionaire? Apparently, he's here scouting for his new Midwest charity initiative." My stomach tightened. I'd read about Wellington, who hadn't. The man turned every donation into a press release, every charitable act into a photo opportunity. He was everything I despised about modern philanthropy: loud, self-congratulating, more concerned with the spotlight than the cause. "Speak of the devil," David muttered, nodding toward the entrance. Wellington swept in like he owned the place, which, knowing his net worth, he probably could. Tall, early 50s, with that particular brand of casual arrogance that came from never hearing the word no. His entourage followed, assistants, photographers, and what looked like a documentary crew. "Is he seriously filming?" Jennifer whispered. "It's for his new series," David said. "Wellington Gives Back. Every episode features him doing charity work in a different city." I focused on my menu, trying to ignore the circus. But Wellington's voice carried across the restaurant as he glad-handed his way through the room, dropping mentions of his foundation and recent donations with practiced ease. "Order whatever you'd like," I told my partners. "Lunch is on me today." We settled into business talk, but I kept getting distracted. At a table near the window, a young couple sat with their daughter, maybe 7 years old. The girl wore a hospital bracelet, her hair just starting to grow back in soft tufts. Chemo, I recognized. My sister had looked like that once. The parents were studying the menu with that careful calculation I knew too well. The math of people trying to give their sick child a normal moment without breaking the bank. The father pointed to something, and the mother shook her head slightly. They settled on 2 appetizers to share and a kid's meal for their daughter. My heart clenched. Marques's was probably their attempt at celebration. Maybe end of treatment, maybe a good scan result. And here they were, counting dollars while surrounded by people who dropped hundreds without thinking. I caught our server's attention. "Excuse me for a moment," I said to my partners, then followed her to the service station. "That family by the window," I said quietly, slipping her my credit card. "I'd like to cover their meal. Whatever they order, including dessert. But please don't tell them until after I've left. Just say someone wanted to celebrate with them." The server, used to the peculiarities of wealthy diners, nodded professionally. "Of course, ma'am." I returned to my table, feeling more centered. This was who I was, even in places like Marques's. The conversation turned to expansion strategies and profit margins, but I kept glancing at the family. The little girl laughed at something her father said, and her mother's face lit up in a way that made the whole restaurant seem brighter. Then Wellington's circus moved closer. He was making his way through the dining room, stopping at tables to introduce himself. The cameras followed, capturing every handshake, every practiced smile. When he reached the family's table, I saw the parents tense up. "I couldn't help but notice your beautiful family," Wellington said, his voice pitched to Carrie. "And that hospital bracelet. You're a brave little fighter, aren't you?" The girl shrank back slightly, but her mother's polite Midwest training kicked in. "She is. We're celebrating her last chemo treatment." "How wonderful," Wellington boomed. He turned to the cameras. "You know what? This is exactly why I'm here in Chicago. To find real people making real differences." He pulled out his phone with a flourish. "I'm going to take care of your entire meal today. No family dealing with medical challenges should have to worry about a check." The father started to protest. "That's very kind, but..." "No buts. Wellington was already signaling the server. Bring them whatever they want. Champagne for the parents, dessert for this brave young lady. It's on me. The same server I'd spoken to looked confused, glancing between Wellington and me. I gave her a tiny shake of my head. Let it go. Make sure you get this, Wellington directed his camera crew. This is what Wellington Gives Back is all about. Spontaneous generosity. Real connections. He posed with the uncomfortable family for several photos, then moved on to his own table, basking in the approving murmurs from other diners. The server, looking flustered, went to the kitchen. Wow, Jennifer said. That was something. Very generous, David added, though his tone suggested he shared my skepticism. I watched the family. The little girl looked overwhelmed, the parents embarrassed by the attention. Their quiet celebration had been turned into someone else's marketing moment. My phone buzzed. The server had sent a text. We'd exchanged numbers on a previous visit. What should I do about the bill? I typed back. Follow the original plan. After he leaves. But Wellington wasn't leaving. He held court at his table, loudly discussing his Chicago initiative, occasionally gesturing toward the family like they were an exhibit. Other diners kept glancing over, some taking their own photos. The family ate quickly, clearly wanting to escape. When they asked for the check, the server followed my instructions. It's been taken care of, she said quietly. Yes, Mr. Wellington explained, the mother said. Actually, the server hesitated, then handed them a small card I always kept for these situations. It simply read, "In celebration of your courage and your daughter's strength. From someone who understands the journey." The parents exchanged confused looks. Wellington, catching the movement, stood up and strode over. Is there a problem with the bill? He asked, cameras following. I was very clear that I was covering it. The server looked panicked. There was a mix-up. Someone else had already arranged to pay for their meal. Before you offered. Wellington's face went through several expressions, confusion, annoyance, then a calculating look. Well, that's impossible. I just decided spontaneously when I saw this lovely family. He turned to the cameras. Unless, is this some kind of restaurant promotion? No, sir, the server said. A guest wished to pay for their meal anonymously. Anonymously? Wellington scoffed. What's the point of that? How will they know who to thank? He pulled out his wallet. Here, I'll pay cash. We'll sort out the other card later. The father stood up. Actually, we'd prefer to accept the original gesture. It seems more personal. He held up my card. This person obviously understands what we've been through. We appreciate your offer, Mr. Wellington, but we're good. The temperature around Wellington's table seemed to drop 10 degrees. He forced a smile. Of course. How touching. The family gathered their things quickly. As they passed my table, the mother's eyes met mine for just a moment. Something passed between us, a flash of recognition, maybe, or just gratitude finding its mark. Then they were gone. Wellington returned to his table, but the performance had soured. Within 15 minutes, he and his entourage left, the cameras packed away. That was weird, Jennifer said. Who pays for someone's meal anonymously when Marcus Wellington is right there offering? Someone who actually cares more about the family than the credit, I said, then caught myself. I mean, that's what I'd guess. David studied me over his wine glass. You know, Sarah, you disappeared right before all that happened. I shrugged. Bathroom break. Bad timing. But I could see the wheels turning in his head. David had known me for 10 years, had seen me quietly pick up checks and overtip servers. He wouldn't say anything. That wasn't his style, but he knew. The rest of lunch passed in a blur of spreadsheets and projections. But I couldn't stop thinking about Wellington's face when he realized someone had beaten him to the gesture. The confusion, the anger, the way he'd tried to force his generosity on a family that didn't want it. As we prepared to leave, the server stopped me. Thank you, she whispered. That family. The little girl asked me to give this to the nice person. She handed me a napkin with a crayon drawing of a smiling sun. I tucked it into my purse, where it joined dozens of other small tokens. Thank you notes left with bartenders, drawings from children, even a poem from Tom the homeless poet, who didn't know I was his benefactor, but somehow always smiled extra wide when I passed. Outside, Chicago's November wind bit harder than it had this morning. But I felt that familiar warmth, the one that came from doing right for its own sake. Wellington could have his cameras and his tax write-offs. I had crayon suns and quiet moments, and the knowledge that somewhere in the city, a family was feeling seen and supported by a stranger who wanted nothing in return. At least, that's how it should have ended. But 3 days later, everything went to hell. Saturday at Rose's kitchen. Wellington arrived with cameras to film himself paying for meals. But the meals were already paid, by me. Stop, I said. These people aren't props for your tax-deductible ego trip. The regulars backed me up. Maria, whose meal I'd covered, told Wellington they didn't need his cameras. Mr. Garcia raised his coffee cup to me. He'd figured out I was their anonymous helper. Real generosity doesn't need an audience, I told him. Wellington called me a hypocrite and coward. But Rosa stepped in. She's family. You're a customer. And we're closed. He left humiliated. The restaurant erupted, 3 years of secret giving revealed. Everyone shared stories of how my anonymous payments had helped them. Maria's daughter joined band. Mr. Garcia bought medicine. Small acts, huge impact. Rosa wouldn't let me pay. Family doesn't pay. Outside, I felt connected, not exposed. Wellington posted online about exposing a vigilante philanthropist, spinning it his way. But it didn't matter. Tom the poet had written, "Angels walk among us, with empty hands and full hearts." He winked at me. Tomorrow I'd be back at Mickey's, Tuesday at Sunrise Cafe. Maybe not invisible anymore, but still the same person. Someone who understood real giving asks for nothing in return. Wellington would never understand. But Chicago did. And that was enough.